Okay, so today I thought I would spend just a little bit of time, do a kind of a short-ish video about the guilt that is associated with people who have bipolar disorder. Now, not an expert here, so it's all opinion only when it comes from me. But I think that a lot of mental illnesses carry extreme feelings of guilt with them. For me, I had feelings of guilt my whole life. Like before I was diagnosed, when I was a little kid. I mean, I remember if my parents were gonna, like, I got to an age where I could decide if I wanted to go to church with them or not. And then I got to a place where if I didn't go, I was overwhelmed with guilt for not going. And that's just one thing. Like if I said no to something, this extreme guilt would just wash all over me and I wouldn't know how to navigate through it. And so then I just started saying yes. I started saying yes to everything to avoid that feeling of guilt. And because I'm doing a video here and not live, I haven't figured out how to share my screen this way. So I pulled up some stuff on my phone that I thought I would read as we go along. And I can also put the links to all of these that I read off in my description so you can find. But this is just a simple Safari search on my phone. The first thing that came up when I looked up guilt associated with bipolar disorder, it just says flat out, I'm guessing this is from bphope.com. I think it is. By its very nature, bipolar depression may amplify self-blaming. Feeling excessive or inappropriate guilt nearly every day is one of the criteria for diagnosing a depressive episode. While I agree with that, I don't necessarily, for me, feel like I was always in a depressive episode when I experienced this excessive feeling of guilt. And as I've been the last almost 9 years now, as I've been medicated, that hasn't gone away even when I'm well balanced. I always feel guilty. I always feel like I should be doing more. But something that I learned on this journey, so I haven't talked about this a whole lot, but 9 years ago, I had a best friend. And I put it in quotes because I find out through everything that happened to me that she was absolutely not a friend to me at all. Because when I was thrown into the psych hospital and I went through that whole trauma, she figured out a way to make it all about her and essentially made me feel even more guilty. And then when I started saying no to her to things afterward and starting saying yes to like things I wanted to do in my own life with my husband, go out. We wanted to go out and, take pictures of the Milky Way. I really was interested in doing that before we got into deep space astrophotography. But this friend expected me to invite her or go with her every time we were going to go do that. And I had to just step back a little bit, like from this whole energy. There are, I think it's called energy suckers or life suckers. There are absolutely people like that in this world. And she was one of them. And after my diagnosis and I started kind of coming to terms with things, I had to really say to myself, I have to put some distance here. This isn't an okay thing. I have to put some distance here. And however she takes it from that is her problem, not mine. And it worked. It worked really, really well. But about 6 months later, I ran into her at the mall of all places in the bathroom. And I was washing my hands, and we'll just call her, I don't know, Sarah. And I was washing my hands and I looked up into the mirror when the door opened behind me when somebody was coming in, and it was Sarah. And so I'm washing my hands. I hadn't talked to her in like 6 months. I had just gotten on my medication. By this time, I had just been on my medication for just like maybe, I don't know, 6 or 8 weeks. I was still transitioning into somebody who I didn't even know, I was still very much confused with my situation and how I was perceiving life. And she walks into the bathroom, and I'm washing my hands, and I said, "Oh, hey, Sarah." And she turned on her heel, she went straight into the stall, and she slammed the door. And it was funny because I'm washing my hands, and at the same time I'm thinking, I'm washing my hands of that too. Like, I just had this, it was kind of a funny association with this interaction with this toxic, codependent friend that I had, but it still upset me. And when my husband and I were walking through the mall to go to the car, I just couldn't get over how she treated me. I mean, it was like high school, and this was 9 years ago. I would have been that would have been 9 years ago. I'd have been something like 33, 32 years old. I mean, we were grown-ups, and here I felt like I was thrust back into high school in the drama I was so confused about it. And so my husband, bless his heart, he finally, he let me kind of talk on about it for a while, and then he stopped and he looked at me and he said, "Who cares?" And I said, I care. And then I started thinking about it, and I'm like, I really shouldn't care to the degree of where it's making me sick. I'm so stressed. It's making me sick. So I had to figure out how to let it go. And for a long time after my bipolar diagnosis, I just decided, because I think leading up to it, I was saying yes to everything. I was busy. I was so busy. I was in college. I was doing an internship. I was doing courses that I think both campuses at this point. I had so much going on. I was saying yes to everything. I was the yes man. I was the yes woman of the yes man. I was saying yes to everything. And I think, looking back, it was in part because I was looking for a way to avoid feeling the guilt of saying no. So after everything hit the fan, and I talked about in my previous video about how I feel like I got struck down, or kicked by a horse, struck by lightning, and just was on the ground, metaphorically in my head, I just laid there for 5 months. And then I started pursuing medication for this. And then I started slowly kind of rising to the occasion and started kind of walking towards, whatever was coming my way. And in that moment, around that timeline, so that would have been October of 2014, I believe. No, 2013, somewhere in there. I get the time all messed up. I have trouble with that. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I decided around that time that I was going to say no to everything. If you invited me somewhere, no. If you wanted me to go back to school, no. I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't going to do anything because I was so fragile. I just could not say yes anymore. I overdid my yeses. They say do everything in moderation. I said yes with no moderation for years, and it hurt me deeply. So I started saying no. I said no. I probably said no to a lot of things. Well, like I said, to everything. But it was probably about 2 years later, maybe not even that long, where I was like, fine. I'm going to start saying yes to some things. I'm going to dip my toe in saying yes to things again. And so I've learned since then how to balance my yeses against my nos, and how to not let the guilt of saying no overrun me in a negative way, where I should be able to look at myself and know that by saying no, I am protecting myself from some things. Now, it's still very hard. I struggle with this extreme guilt every day now, even though I'm very well balanced and I feel like I have kind of a good grasp on things now after all this time. I still feel guilty every day for not doing more. And the reason why the impending time change the daylight savings coming back here in a couple of weeks. The reason why that is a hard time of year for me is because when it's lighter later, I feel like, oh, well, I could go do this and I could go do that and I should go do this and I should go do that. And then before you know it, I've had a day where I've expended too much energy going and doing and going and doing and going and doing that I have a hard time coming back down. And so hypomania, which is something that I'd like to discuss as well, we could even discuss it here. I could look up some things and kind of associate it with what I've experienced with hypomania versus mania, because mania is completely outrageous behavior. Mania is off the charts. It's the not sleeping, but hypomania is, and it's different. I think it's more different than mania for a lot of people. Like, I don't think that people with hypomania experience the exact same thing as much as people with mania do. For me, with hypomania, at the end of a day where I've just gone and done because it's light and I can and I should and whatever, I put this pressure on myself. I come home at the end of the day. Sometimes I'll be shaky. I'll be irritable. I'll feel like I drank 3 cups of coffee because I overdid it. And I have a hard time reining myself back in, coming back to a normal energy. But I think that when it comes to guilt, one of the quotes that I've put out there with people just in conversation, even in casual conversation, is self-care isn't selfish. Saying no to something is not selfish. If you're doing it to protect yourself from this guilt that you already struggle with, and if you know that by saying yes to something is going to make you feel more guilt and more shame, don't do it because you feel obligated. Sarah, my friend, I said yes to everything for her. I would have crossed an ocean for her. And then I realized she wouldn't even skip a puddle for me. You have to be very, very careful with who you say yes to when you have bipolar disorder. Because the wrong people, the life suckers, the energy suckers, it's not a give and take dynamic. You have to be very, very careful with takers. Because you'll give and give and give, and all they'll do is take. They will never give you anything in return of substance. And codependent relationships are very, very toxic for people with mental illness. I think people with mental illness can be on both sides of a codependent relationship. And so you have to be very, very careful about who you are, who you want to be, and who the people in your life are. And do you want that energy in your orbit? I came across this article just a few minutes ago. Let me see if we can find it. It wasn't that far down. Yeah, expert advice on overcoming guilt from bipolar mood episodes. This is from BP Hope magazine. If you're not subscribed, you can subscribe to them. They'll send you emails of testimonials from other people who struggle with bipolar disorder. And some of them are great. Some of them I don't totally agree with or follow, but that's okay. You know, you pick and choose what suits you and what goes with, your experience. But I loved this, and this is something that by me, I did this unbeknownst to me, kind of, when I was putting some distance in between Sarah and I, because I needed to think for myself, and having her energy in my life was taking that away from me. So I put some distance there. And so the first thing on this list from BP Hope is set boundaries. When you're feeling stable, talk with the people in your life about what happens when you're in a manic or depressive episode. This will prepare them for what to expect, and you should be clear on what they expect from you. Ideally, a meaningful conversation like this will minimize future occasions for feeling guilt. Agreeing on boundaries is a big deal. Explore ways for those around you to be firm in their expectations without being judgmental. I did not have a conversation with Sarah about what I needed to do as my first step to rehabilitation from being in the psych hospital. I didn't have this conversation because I knew her well enough, or at least I felt like I knew her or thought that I knew her well enough to know that she would be judgmental. One of the first things that she said to me when I came out of the psych hospital was, I was on the phone with her and I said, I was in tears and I said, I am so humiliated. I am so embarrassed. I don't even know what happened to me. I had already come off a lot of my meds, but I was telling her this. I was like, I don't know. This was just the most embarrassing and humiliating thing I'd ever been through in my life. And on the other end of the phone, Sarah responded, well, yeah, I'd be embarrassed too. And that just kind of put me over the edge with her, where I was just like, I cannot talk to you about this because you make it about you first and foremost. You insult me in the process. I can't set boundaries with somebody who's going to turn it around and make me the bad guy. There are two people in every relationship. I'm not going to take 100% of the responsibility of why something doesn't work ever again. Never. And I learned it from her and that relationship with her. And I think that the 6 months later thing in the bathroom at the mall happened because she took my distancing myself as an insult to her. Like I was cutting her out of my life and I didn't want anything to do with her. But she never even talked to me about it. She never even tried. And I wasn't in a place mentally where I could actually organize my thoughts to start that conversation with her. I was inept then. I'm not now. I was then. She was inept in her own way. And there just was no have a big blow up fight because confrontation in that way, in that state of mind where I was then was, I couldn't have done it. I just could not have done it. So the setting the boundaries was the first thing on the list. And I won't read every one of them, but I'll just kind of bullet point what's the most important, at least in my opinion. So the next one is increased self-awareness. Stress, anxiety, and rumination often go hand in hand. Rumination, I am an expert at. I can think something to death. I absolutely can. If you need me to overthink something, not a problem. I can absolutely do that like a pro. I can overthink anything. That's a slippery slope because when you're in a bipolar low, you can overthink some really terrible things about yourself, about your future. It's an I always have trouble saying this word, existential crisis when you can do that. And people with bipolar can do it very, very well. And it can send you on to guilt. That's what I said. Like, if you ruminate on something, then you feel guilty for thinking that way. Then you feel guilty for, like dwelling on it. That's a tough balance. Talk therapy is a suggestion. I think that even this is kind of like, for me, this is kind of talk therapy because I'm putting it out there and I don't actually have to look somebody in the face. And it's just a way for me to express stuff. But, talk to whoever you can in your life about it. But if there are people in your life that you can't approach and you have this feeling, you're like, I don't think I can talk to this person. I don't think that they will receive what I have to say well, in a healthy way for me to actually have progress. And that's what I did with Sarah. Now, making amends. This is an interesting one because at first when things fell apart with Sarah, I felt really guilty about putting distance there. Like the guilt was overwhelming. But then, like I said before, I started coming to this place of, I'm not going to take 100%. It's a 50-50 split. The reason that our friendship fizzled away was partially me and partially her. As much as she probably doesn't want to admit it, yeah. It's a two-way street. It's not all on me. Making amends is very important, though. And people with bipolar disorder, especially in a manic episode, will say and do things that they don't mean and that are harsh, that are just, they're flat out lies and they're harsh because we're angry. We're sad, we're depressed, we're hopeless, we're hapless. That's just part of that. I've gotten better about not doing that, but occasionally something will drop where I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry. I really shouldn't have said that. And I will say this, I am a professional apologizer. I am so good at saying I'm sorry. But then I started realizing probably about 8 months or a year after my diagnosis, I was apologizing for everything. Everything I was apologizing. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm sorry that happened. Like I was apologizing for things happening that were like an act of God and I had nothing to do with. I was apologizing for way too much because I was feeling guilty about like somehow I did something to cause something to hurt somebody and I just would apologize. And I'm like, no, I'm not apologizing anymore. I'm not going to apologize for things that things I didn't do. I'm not doing that. That was a big thing for me. That was really tough to kind of get to a place where I felt like that because I was a little bit nuts about the apologizing. And now I'm very good at apologizing when I know I've done something wrong. I've got no problem. I don't have a problem with that. When I do something wrong, absolutely, I will take responsibility for it. But I'm not going to approach a friend or an ex-friend and try to apologize when I know I'm not going to get an apology back. Because over the years that she and I were friends, I apologized to her countless times and she never apologized to me once. And there was no way that everything that happened during that time was all my fault. Period. Not possible. Ooh, accepting the past. This just talks about staying trapped in a cycle of shame and negativity paves the way for depression. Mindfulness techniques. Mindfulness is a wonderful, beautiful thing. Like being mindful of things. That's a practice that I can talk about that more in a different video, but being mindful of things is very good. It's such a great practice. Look up some stuff on how to be more mindful because you find some amazing things that can really help you kind of turn the finger from pointing out to pointing in, and you see yourself differently, and you want to adopt some different techniques, and mindfulness is a great way to do it. It can be a powerful tool to cultivate self-compassion, non-judgmental, and acceptance of the past and ourselves. Love it. Practice self-compassion. This one's tough. This one's really tough for me. I'll read this one. It's short. Learning from behavior is a good thing, but it's essential to realize the past wrongdoings or mistakes don't make someone a bad person. By practicing self-affirming, compassionate self-talk, you can remind yourself that no one's perfect and learn to adopt a positive mindset that builds resilience. I couldn't have worded that better myself. That thing of, making, like doing bad things or making mistakes makes you feel like a bad person. That's just not true. Like that's something that I had to go through too. It's like, I'm not a bad person because I'm human and I mess up and I am in error. This doesn't make me a bad person. That guilt, I have to kind of be like, stupid thinking, go away, because that does not belong here because I am human and I am going to make mistakes. Preventative action. Let me see. Taking preventative action to minimize future damage matters enormously. Oh, that's a good one. Taking steps to learn from the past is beneficial, and it may take different forms. It could be speaking with a credit counselor, apologizing to a loved one. Just knowing that you're doing something to help remedy any harm that resulted from what you said or did during a mood episode will help. That's the end of it. But yes, this is from BP Hope magazine, and the article it's titled "Expert Advice on Overcoming Guilt from Bipolar Mood Episodes." That's just something I wanted to talk about today. The guilt, the shame, and being mindful, like practicing that mindfulness that I was talking about, helps you determine what things are rational for you to feel guilty over and what things are completely irrational that you're still carrying guilt for. We need to be able to say no to things. We need to be able to protect ourselves. I shouldn't feel guilty about that. Now, if I make a mistake and I say something when I'm in a bad mood that, is kind of uncalled for, then I need to own up to that and I need to apologize for that. But you have to know where the line and the limit is, and practicing that mindfulness will help you get there. But that Sarah girl and that whole situation. I'm not going to apologize to somebody that for everything. I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna get on, and I'm not gonna get on YouTube and be like, I'm so sorry for all the problems in the world, because it's not my burden to carry. One thing that I think it was in a book I was listening to on Audible, I think it was talking about how boundaries can be looked at like our yards. Like you have a fence here, like I have a fence here, there, and there. This is my yard. What I do with my yard is my business, but I'm not going to water her grass because it's dying. And I'm not going to take care of their dogs because they're barking. That's their business. And it's not mine. This is my yard. I need to stay within it. And I like being a helpful person. I like reaching out an olive branch to people and trying to, help where I can. But I also need to remember my area that I need to stay within so that everybody's boundaries are healthy. Because if I start crossing over and they start crossing over, we have a problem. And that's the same thing with people. You have to be very careful about who you let into your yard, because they can come in and start redoing everything. I have a touch of OCD with my bipolar disorder. It's not terrible, but I do have a touch of OCD. And this friend, before things fell apart, so I am very, I don't know how, I think a lot of people are like this about their Christmas trees. At Christmas time, they put them up, and women especially, everything has its place. Like I step away, I look at it, I go back to it. Maybe even a day later, I move this little icicle one branch over. Like I have it a certain way. That's how I've always been. I love decorating my Christmas tree. But this friend knows that about me, and she turned it into a joke. And she was over at my house. That was before I lived here. That was at my townhome. She came over to the townhome, and she looked at me with kind of like this trolling eye, and she grabbed one of my ornaments and she moved it. Now, okay, if you're like a 10-year-old kid, fine. But come on here. Get out of my yard. And so when I started pushing that, putting some distance there, putting some miles in between, I truly think that she thought that I just cut all ties with her, that I didn't want to be friends with her at all anymore. And that wasn't the case. I wanted to have a healthy friendship, but she was going through her own issues. Her marriage was falling apart. She was having trouble with her family. All of this stuff was happening, and I just could not get involved if she wasn't going to be helpful for me either. Like, it is a two-way street. And some people you just know are going to react poorly to you putting distance between you and them. That's their yard, their business. You have to take care of you and yours. And you need to learn and be mindful of how to do it without being completely overcome by guilt and shame. Because we already have enough guilt and shame with bipolar disorder that we don't need to add to it with people. We need to try to avoid it with people. And if that means saying no, fine, say no. If that means, putting some distance in between you and somebody who you've known for a while, but you don't feel like they're going to serve your journey in a positive way, fine. Do what you have to do. But don't carry the weight of the world because you can. That's how you get into trouble really, really fast. And I do think that guilt perpetuates, the rising of the energy, the up into, that was another thing I was going to mention before I finish this, was the hypomania. Let me look up what hypomania means, just to see what it says. Hypomania. That wasn't me. Let's see. What is it? Hypomania. Abnormally. Oh, here we go. Cleveland Clinic. Hypomania is a condition in which you display a revved up energy or activity level, mood, or behavior. The new energized you is recognized by others as beyond your usual self. Hypomania is a less severe form of mania, and both are commonly part of bipolar disorder. Treatments include psychotherapy, medication, and self-care strategies. So hypomania, like I said, with the increased energy, like I felt like I had been drinking a coffee all day. I had a hard time sitting down. I could have probably not ran a marathon, but I could have just kept going for a very long time because I was just already kind of like amped up. And that's what and I think that guilt can perpetuate and start you on this place of rising to the occasion of hypomania. And then if you can't rein it in from there, you're just going to keep going. My medication helps rein me in. But if without it, I know I would just keep revving right up to mania, because it's just kind of a slow rising of energy until you are out of your wits. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you've ever been 5150'd and thrown in a psych hospital for a week, and it was traumatic and horrifying and embarrassing, you are not alone in that. And I'm sorry that happened to you. You should have been treated better. We all need to just listen to one another more and be caring and not turn everything into, well, yeah, I would have been embarrassed too. While that may be true, it's not really the point. I'm sorry that happened to you. What can I do to help? Do you need me to bring you food, or do you want to get out of the house? Like, what do you need? Do you just need a shoulder to cry on? I will come right over. Like, there are some appropriate responses to people who have been in that situation, and there are some inappropriate ones. This same person, after my diagnosis, because I don't think that she wanted me to have attention on it, she told me that I was too smart to have bipolar disorder. I mean, I guess it's a backhanded compliment, but I'm in pretty good company. I'm pretty sure Einstein was diagnosed with bipolar type 1. So I'm in good company, and he was a genius. So intellect, bipolar doesn't discriminate, If you can be the smartest person on the planet, that doesn't mean that that you can't have mental illness. People with mental illness have beautiful minds. We can rejoice and celebrate that to a degree. And that will help by itself to get rid of the shame and the guilt and the stigma that's attached to it. So let's all just practice, being a caring person, a listener's ear, so we can be there for those who need us. But if somebody in your life is toxic and is making you worse, you got to figure out a way to put some distance there. Because your energy is not, it's not a matter of importance for somebody like that. And when you're going through something like what you're going through like that, your energy matters. What you're going through matters and needs attention from those in your world. So anyways, that's all I'm doing for now. I will try to add these links in the description of this video. If you have anything you want to comment on here, or like, or share, or subscribe, or do whatever you want to do, I don't care. But I just wanted to talk about how guilt and shame, we have more control over that, as well as our advocacy for medication and treatments, than we realize. Mindfulness is a practice that it can help open your mind in ways where you kind of give yourself a break, a much deserved break of taking on all of the guilt the world has to offer and releasing it back to where it belongs, and not keeping it, in your luggage to carry on the journey. So it's a very good practice. So, just remember that you're worth letting some things go. You're worth saying no to some things as well. So in the meantime, till next time, have a blessed week. And remember, self-care isn't selfish.